On this episode of AV Week, virtual events focusing on getting employees back to the office safely, the value of regional shows, and Digital Signage Expo is no more. All that and more next on AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is AV Week, episode 475, recorded Friday, September 25th, 2020. Free ideas.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Kramer, AV Beyond the Box, and by
Draper, focused on innovative solutions.
This is AV Week, your weekly wrap-up of audio-visual news and information. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. With us to discuss the news and information we have gathered for this week. First and foremost, you know her as AV Dawn Mead. She is an industry expert and an end user. So welcome, ma'am.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So Dawn is on the East Coast. That's about all I can tell you. This other young lady is on the West Coast, also an industry expert and an end user. Welcome, Meg Ciorini Smith. Welcome, ma'am.
Hi. Thanks for having me, Tim.
Absolutely. Also with us is Mr. Christopher Hope. Christopher is in the Loop Lab, or from the Loop Lab up in the Boston area. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Tim.
Absolutely. And last but not least, my buddy Keith Kennedy from Grand Being down in the Orlando area, I believe. If I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
All right.
Thanks for having me, Tim.
Absolutely. So let's start off the first story this week. A bit of sad news out of the exhibition space. Digital Signage Expo has canceled this year, has closed completely, actually. In addition, the showrunner Exponation has filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. That includes liquidation of all the assets and closure of the company, according to a response from the company. Show was first launched in 2003 and had become a fairly popular destination for the digital signage industry. Dawn, we'll start with you on this. What does this say about kind of the state of, I guess, trade shows and trade shows in general, but also the exhibition and the staging industry as it sits right now?
You know, I hate to say it because it is, already September, but it's only September. This, I think, is going to be one of the first of many, unfortunately. This pandemic has really hit the world so hard and has so disrupted the economy of so many places, and large gatherings being banned, or even if they're holding them, people afraid to go to them. Unfortunately, I think it's going to take a long time for both the exhibition, and trade show market, as well as the concert, live staging, live events market to recover. Even my own company, we would hold large quarterly meetings sometimes, or special events where we would, gather lots of employees in one place. All of those have gone virtual. We don't even have buildings worth of people working at the moment. We still have scattered one or two people here or there actually going into the office. So, I hate the term, but the new normal, at least for the next few years, is going to be, we're just not going to have this market, this field. And unfortunately, a lot of companies are going to go the way of Exponation. I wish there was a way to solve that, because that's a significant, not Exponation, but like that vertical is a significant chunk of our industry. And, we all probably know a lot of colleagues and friends who are either out of work or on the bubble right now as a result. It's not good. So let's hurry up and find a cure, folks.
Well, absolutely, yeah, and that was one of the things that, looking at that, there are folks that do events that support that. Here in the States, you've got Freeman, which is one of the bigger ones, but you also have a lot of folks that are just simple, not that are contractors for a certain area. We were supposed to all be in Vegas this summer for Infocom, and a number of those folks that we hire, the other trade show publications hire that are there as W-2 employees. They're simply they not W-2 but W-9 employees, where they're contractors, and we're seeing a lot of that go away. Keith, I'll continue with you on this. You go to a lot of trade shows, probably more than me. What does this say about trade shows and exhibits and live events going forward?
Well,
a lot of what Don said is correct. I mean, events are shut down, travel is shut down. I mean, you know me, in normal times, I fly a couple 100,000 miles a year, and I haven't been anywhere since the end of February, which is very strange. But, we're going to see a lot of changes, but at the same time, do we need a separate show for digital signage? I mean, in the beginning of any new technology, new market, you have things like that pop up. I mean, I remember going back to the 90s when home automation was new. We had separate shows for home automation. You don't have that anymore. It's part of CEDIA, it's part of ISE, it's part of everything else. So digital signage is an AV IT technology. It's part of Infocom, it's part of ISE, it's part of AVIXA. And there are huge sections of those shows that are concentrated on it. So, I think that a show like that is one of the first to go when you have something like this happen. It's unfortunate. I know we all love to gather at these events, but there's going to be changes. Events will come back because you cannot replace them. That's evident by the examples of virtual events that we've all been part of recently. I know yesterday I just signed up for virtual Zoomtopia. We'll see what that's going to be like. But, I think that we'll get enough of what we need to for the digital signage industry through the rest of the trade shows. And we need to focus on how do we do these trade shows as soon as possible and make them effective.
Yeah. The one thing that I would offer from other exhibitors, and this is not my words, but I've asked that same question because DSE was predominantly a smaller show, right? They averaged around 4,000. For contrast and comparison, Infocom was roughly 40. ISE at its height was 80. This year was a different year, but in 2019 it was at 80. The exhibitors that went there, and these are not small exhibitors. You're talking about NEC and Peerless AV and JVC, Legrand AV. They went there because of that clientele. The DSE did a really good job of getting the end users and the creatives together. And I don't know that you're gonna find that that same concentration necessarily in at Infocom or ISE. Certainly, and I would say ISE. They did have Hall 8, which back at the Rye, if you've never been, Hall 8 was the one you went into if you needed some light in your life. It was quite bright. It was nothing, but it was all the LED manufacturers and a lot of the digital signage stuff. So
Right.
yeah, I'd be interested to see what happens coming out of this. Chris, we'll bring this to you. What does this mean actually for that industry, for the digital signage industry? I mean, Keith mentioned that we can get it. We can still get that information from Infocom and other trade shows.
No, absolutely. I think what you're going to see is, in the midst of crisis, in the midst of challenges that we're facing in trade shows here in 2020, I think you will see more companies that are going to essentially be that are going to come up and be what I call virtual concierge companies, right? So they're really in charge of the customer service aspect of bringing what was an in-person event to a virtual experience effectively. One company like that is Soundings Connect, which connects organizations with freelance meeting and event talent to actually help guide some of these organizations to moving some of their expos that are in person to online. And so I think there's still a chance or opportunity for there to be some kind of digital signage expo, if not from the actual company, because obviously it's filed for bankruptcy. But I think that from some other sector or space, such as AVIXA or some other entity that could tap into making this a virtual event where people are really going to want, draw attention to and want to come and attend online.
Yeah, absolutely. Meg, that brings up a good point is how do we get, those creatives together with the technology, with the technologist, as well as kind of the clients, is it something where, either AVIXA creates a separate show or somebody else comes along DSF, by the way, the Digital Science Federation, a group, a nonprofit organization that DSE helped found, is still viable, is still out there. I want to make that clear. So that organization is still working, and those members as well as the chair. But who takes over for this?
So I think if the DSF steps up, they've really got an opportunity to do something that maybe wasn't as well achieved before. I know that the big shows are always like the family reunion for our industry, right? We always get together and we see, who's working for who's moved down 2 stalls and who's completely changed their vertical.
Meg has never been to a trade show, by the way.
Yeah.
That is totally what happens.
Yes. For me, what the DSF has opportunity to do is to bank on the community aspect. Right? I agree that maybe we didn't need a show completely dedicated to digital signage, right? But if the DSF can partner with AVIXA or partner with ISC and do like educational outreach across all vendors so that they maintain that community of those of us who are impacted by digital signage. But let's be honest, digital signage and LED in general is one aspect of an ecosystem. Right. So it's really, when you see these big shows, like ISC is hands down my favorite because it touches everything, and you can start seeing how you build your own ecosystem at one show. There could be case studies. The DSF could really get into maybe hosting local tours across the world for individual regions. I have no affiliation with DSF, by the way. I'm just throwing out ideas. But, for me, since we can't travel, and actually even before COVID, I would argue that it was so imperative when making a decision about the technology we're going to use. I wanted to see how other people had used it, right? How did your previous customers, do you have one that doesn't have an NDA, right? That you can share with us, or that they would be willing to talk with me about their experience, right? And then across a few times, we were able to go view an install that was public, right? That was happening, that we got to really talk with the people who were already using this technology. And that made a community of people where it's like, oh, good. Now I know that if I run into a problem with my system, I have contacts, right? I have, people that I don't need to go straight to the service of the vendor, that I can try to figure it out myself before spending money on a service tech. Right. So the DSF, to me, and how we can move forward on trade shows, maybe not so specific, but really making those halls their individual worlds, right? Or having those big sections, like AVIXA has their big tabletop or their education session at ISC, right? Where people meet and have, they go on their own little tours, or maybe even doing a conference that's in partnership with ISC or Infocom, similar to how the XR Summit was happening at ISC. So that's where I could see the DSF trying to fill that gap of taking that very centralized and very specific information, because it is needed. It's absolutely needed. I need focus on those areas and not just general, vague, salesy terms with maybe a product specialist on a booth. I need an engineer there. So maybe the DSF can really assist in bringing the community together that way, but at one of these bigger shows.
Yeah. I don't know why I didn't think about this. I didn't put this in the notes, but this just popped in my head. Is this maybe the start of those regional shows? And I mentioned that because the fall for us here at AVNation is, I do not travel nearly as much as Mr. Kennedy, but the fall is kind of the start of our second round of travel, which typically has included New York Digital Signage Week. Our buddy Adrian from Daily Do puts that together, gathers folks around from around the country and kind of a little bit around the world. I mean, he's from the UK, so that kind of counts, and Russ is from Paris, so there you go. But that is a federated show. Right. And it's not under one roof. It's several places around the city. Granted, New York is kind of the place in the States where you would go to for digital signage outside of Vegas, let's be honest. But is this something where we're going to see more and more regionalized shows, like Meg was talking about, where you can still bring the technology, you can still bring the engineers to the end users and to the technicians, but smaller, more condensed, I guess, and more safe.
I would hope so. Sorry, I'm going to jump back in.
Yeah.
It's one thing to be at a very big trade show, and then you've got your scheduled time, that you've worked ahead, that you're going to meet with those specific vendors. And that works really well in the case of international travel. Like some companies, they're based in Germany, right? So the closest thing, like getting them to the US is very expensive, right? But, getting us to meet in the middle somewhere in Europe helps cover costs, and you can do a million meetings at once at these big trade shows. Yeah. But when I want to sit down and go through specifics, then that means I have to schedule that. I have to, put money into that. They have to put money into that. So what if they do big regional city tours, or, work with their clientele to say, hey, if you're willing, let's work together. And, even, because competition's one thing, but once you're installed, it's another to be able to go see it somewhere and then get that one-on-one time with engineers. That's magic. That, to me, as an end user, that's what I really, really want. Is I need to sit down with the people who really know what is going on at a deeper level, so that I can make the technology choices with the most information. I don't want a talking brochure, right? That's not what I'm there for. Right. So I hope they do regional shows and do big city tours, because then, at least we could get somewhere relatively safe.
Yeah, it's similar to what's been done with some of the stadium tours, and also going back to something you mentioned before with the DSF. If you look at what goes on with, I think it's called EduCause, right before Infocom, the education market has their specialized sessions revolving around the big shows. At ISC, they have a big building automation session that they do. So there's no reason why you can't build other programs in and around these things. If you're already going to be in Vegas for Infocom for 3 or 4 days, to make it 5 or 6 and really, dip your toe deeper into one of these more important verticals, the one that's important to you, and that's great. But, you mentioned a 4,000 person show in Vegas. I mean, that's a lot. For somebody from California, it's not that big of a deal, but for somebody from the East Coast to go to Vegas for a show that you can basically blow in and out of in a day is a lot, where you can build that in. And, Avixa and ISC and others have been proven that they can get end users to those shows. I mean, look at who goes to these shows. You have people from universities, from corporations, from military, all those types of things. I think we may even see, another specialized show that happens here in Orlando every year right after Thanksgiving is ITSEC. I mean, what's going to happen with ITSEC?
Well, I think this is, I was going to say, this is something we've talked about, though, over the years, both on AVWeek and on AV Social, my show, when we're talking about the marketing aspects, is, COVID aside, there's a place for ISE, Infocom, the big mega shows that draw people. And when you go to those, traveling from the East Coast to Vegas or West Coast to Orlando, it is a cost of investment. And you do only, unless you're, manning a booth, you usually only send like your owner, your top couple of engineers, maybe a sales guy. There's a place for that. You can walk from one booth to the next and say, okay, compare product A to product B, apples to apples right here. Let's talk, overview. That's the marketing speech that Meg mentioned. But there's always also been all the manufacturer or distributors, some manufacturers, rep firms that host their own little, we always called them mini infocoms.
Yeah.
And they have them in all the major cities. And, here in the Baltimore, DC, Philadelphia area, any given time, there's a couple going on, usually after Infocom, once all the new products are released, then they come and bring it so that the folks that got to go to Infocom can get a deeper look, can talk to those engineers, but they can also bring all of their techs, the guys that drew the short straw and had to stay home and man the customers while we were off partying at the trade show. And so the smaller shows, they do exist regionally. They're just not usually hosted by your AVIXAs and your bigger organizations. They're more, I'm a rep firm and I'm going to put all of the companies I represent in a ballroom. Come and see them and we can talk to engineers.
But there's no reason why AVIXA can't step in and do that. I mean, CEDIA has been doing that for the last number of years, where they have CEDIA regionals. They call them something else now, and it went private. Then CEDIA brought it back in, and it's done in conjunction with the reps. It's done very well. So I agree with that.
Even stuff like what AVNation sponsors or other AV marketing or publications. AVIT Summit, when we get, you get to go tour a facility and really see that technology being used. And like for anyone who hasn't done it that way, getting to go there, and that isn't even sponsored by one of these great firms. That could definitely be something where, a gap gets filled, where it's, along with one of these big shows or the regionals. It's like, hey, if you come to this regional show, you also included in that is we're going to go tour a facility that displays this kind of technology or this kind of technology or this kind of technology.
Absolutely. Just for clarification, AVIT Summit, that was Megan Dutta's SCN. That wasn't us.
Yeah. I'll just add.
I don't need to get a call from her. I'm just saying.
Sorry, Megan Dutta is, SCN did really good job.
I just echo some
wrap
of the,
us up on this. We'll go.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I was just going to add this sentiment that I think there's an opportunity here, in the sense that, yes, I do agree that there's a chance for us to move into a more regional model, and really having an organization like an AVIXA really kind of sponsor that or move that forward. This idea of, for example, just using it as an example, because you started with Adrian's work with Digital Signage Week in New York, or Digital Signage Expo rather. It's one of those things where for a lot of folks, it's a great opportunity to learn more about the industry, but more importantly, buyers to be in the space, to see new products, get to talk to vendors. But for the most part, it was also a challenge for some folks, in the sense that, there are limited numbers of companies in New York. So you're traveling across country, it can be expensive depending on where you're located and your budget. And so the regional, I think, is a better way to kind of approach it. And I think that if you're able to add on another component, where I've been to a lot of these trade shows, it's been great meeting people and networking, but I know that to truly feed these expos and these events, you have to have buyers, right? That's the true lifeblood of this. And I think there is a chance here for the industry to really focus and hone in their messaging to those buyers, to these smaller regional events.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we're going to drop the last story, guys, but we'll cover one more here. A couple different things. Our friends over at AV Magazine, they're doing an event on October 2nd called AVWorks. It is, or in the UK, but it's a virtual conference. They're bringing together experts from Midwich, Argent, Bloomberg, Google, and a whole lot of others, talking about how AV will help companies get back into the office. In addition to that, Almo Pro AV announced their fall E4 event this week. Just like they did in May, they're doing a virtual event called Almo E4V, October 27th through 29th. AVNation, Rave Pubs, and 16.9 are all creating content for the 3-day event. Our part, we're focusing on the future of work, future of meetings and events. Keith, I'm going to start with you, and I'm actually going to end with the ladies, because they're both end users getting their 2 cents on this. But how can AV be used to get the employees back to the office, but to do it safely?
How can it be used to get people back to the office? Well, I mean, we've been using AV and technology for the last 6 months to keep our businesses going and keep contact with our customers and our fellow employees and all that going. And it's been lifesaver. I tell people, can you imagine if this had happened 5 years ago or 7 years ago? What would we have done without all of this stuff? So I think it's kept us all connected. So we're not going to be starting from scratch. Everybody's got these relationships going. So what we're going to do as people start going back to the office is continuing to use the same technology so that we can be in the office and we can collaborate with smaller groups, socially distanced in larger spaces. But as we need to have larger group meetings and company town halls and things like that, we'll use the same thing we've been using all along to host those things and be able to continue the lifeblood of communication.
Absolutely. All right, Christopher, same kind of question is where either inside the Loop Lab or you're hearing from your integrator friends, what are folks saying about getting, helping folks get back into the office safely?
Yeah, that's a good question. Some of our work is being done with Red Thread. Big shout out to Red Thread, which is an AV integration. Well, they have an AV integration department, but for the most part, it's a professional space furniture company, essentially. And so one of the things that we're seeing more and more is being able to strengthen a site's AV capabilities with understanding that most places are going to be re-entering with the hybrid model. So the telecommunications becomes really important. So the folks that are being in the office, which in many cases we're seeing more and more, if your last name is A through G, you get to come in offices on these days. Everyone else is working from home. And so you are seeing more investment being made in the software to make it happen, where people can still have their weekly meetings to talk about results or to talk about different initiatives and projects. I think that, AV Works is going to be an incredible opportunity to hear some really great people. I'm familiar with Greg Jeffries at Visual Displays and Jeff Fairbanks, who's going to be speaking from Bloomberg. But I think, it'll be interesting for me as someone who is obviously doing on the workforce end, in that we are preparing our students with future-proofing skills that are going to be needed to maintain the AV equipment that's going to be installed in many of these facilities, to be able to install effectively this equipment and software in these facilities. And those are future-proofing skills that I think this next generation of AV folks are going to really need in order to have a sustaining and thriving career in AV for the foreseeable future.
Absolutely. That's a really good point too, is making sure that we can, help our folks, continue employment.
And I'll throw an add on there is that I think it's even more critical that, there's going to be a huge windfall of financial windfall in the sense of this technology being installed, inserted, but also the need for it to be maintained and operated. And obviously with that, you have a workforce. I want to make it as much as possible one that is equitable, one where women are largely included in that space, where people of color also are largely included in that space. And so that's why I do what I do with the Loop Lab.
Absolutely. All right, Dawn, both from what you're hearing in your colleagues, but also your work itself, what are you seeing and hearing about getting back into the office?
Well, it's multifaceted. So not just my industry that I can't, or company that I can't tell you about, is considered essential. Within that organization, my role as an AV person has been considered essential. So I've been working nonstop since all this started, just a lot of it from my couch or my home office, going in when necessary and being one of the few folks in person. But what we've been really slammed with, we're ordering and deploying a ton of little webcams and home systems, like on the wall room kits for some of the executives to sit at home with the professional microphone, professional speakers, displays, all of that. Our facilities folks, when you have a giant organization, You always have a few, banner rooms that you use for all the big meetings, your auditoriums, your executive conference rooms, the big rooms, that sort of thing. And then we just have tons of little conference rooms and spaces all over the place that may or may not have AV. We're spending a lot of time and a lot of money right now putting AV in those rooms so that as our workforce comes back and we have to socially distance, we have one auditorium at the location I'm at that usually seats 250 to 300 people. Putting the chairs out in COVID approved spacing, it's a 50-person room, if that.
Ooh.
So in a case like that, equipping some of these smaller conference rooms and spaces that we don't normally use with technology and using technology to tie it all in, we're able to bring workers safely back and socially distance them while still having them as an active, for real part of the meeting. And we can tie in the workers that are still at home using, Zoom and similar technologies. So all of those things are what's currently happening at my place of employment, and I'm sure a lot of other large places of employment. And I also have been getting a lot of emails from manufacturers who are bringing out more and more what when I was an integrator, we called it the hospital gear that, was sort of the sealed units that could go in and get splashed with biological whatever and wipe off easily, that sort of thing. More of that shifting into the real world that isn't hospital world. And we're also getting things like, displays at the front of the building that automatically take your temperature. So stuff like that, I think some of it'll be a gimmick. It'll be a short-term boom, but there is definitely a lot of tech work currently going on, AV work going on currently at the big companies just to get our folks back, not just to keep them working while they're gone.
All right. Meg, you'll have the last word on this.
So number one, I love that that they're doing this, because on top of a lot of our veteran AV workforce being out of work, especially those on the front lines, right? Like techs actually going in and servicing stuff like that. There is a younger generation that just got out and is just getting in to some of this. So, this is a good opportunity for them to realize that there's a community, which on every single one of the shows that I'm on, I harp on that a lot, that we as an AV community really do come together in a way that I don't know that a lot of other people have. And that comes from every vertical. But I think that some of the conversations that they plan on talking about, and to kind of echo Dawn's point about there's a shift in technology right now happening so that we can return to work safely. And that's provoking new innovations like touchless control, right? Which that may sound like a gimmick now, but when you think about when you think about the ramifications of that in a accessibility point of view, that's not going to go away, because now you've just given a whole new set of parameters to people who may not have the same kind of functionality that that another human might have. So seeing how that's evolving is really fascinating to me, and that's a whole branch of different technology coming to light and helping us get safer at work, right? So coming back into an office and using technology to facilitate communication, it's getting back to that whole idea of what are we trying to achieve by meeting together, and what can we do to make that as facilitated as possible, because even just going back and meeting with real people, it takes maybe 5 minutes to come to a decision in a hallway or at the water cooler that I would have to normally set up like a 30-minute virtual conference for. That human interaction and that human connectivity, there is no replacement for that. That's who, we're not bionic. We're not, we're not yet at the level to where webcam body language is a thing. Like I can't tell when one of you is about to speak, right? And then we do that weird, awkward talk over each other thing and go ahead. That's not, versus being in person where there's a cadence. And I don't know that technology can or should replace that cadence. We should be facilitating the safety aspect. Splash Guard product is awesome. I think that's great. But I think that's if companies are gonna, start working, that's branching out into a whole new innovative territory that they have not done before. And someone's got to have the courage to make that investment, because we're not getting out of this anytime soon.
No, that is for sure. So we'll leave it at that. Thank you all so much. Mr. Christopher Hope, thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Tim. It's always
Absolutely.
a pleasure.
And where do people find you or the Loop Lab?
All right. People can find us online. We are located at www.thelooplab.org. And you can always reach out to me. My email address is chope, CHOPE, as in hope in AV, at thelooplab.org.
All right. Very good. Ms. Dawn Mead, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you for having me again. And I cannot tell you exactly where I am. Somewhere between Philadelphia and Northern Virginia. I'm in hiding, working for Redacted. But you can always find me online, Twitter, Insta, Snapchat, all those things at AVDawn. And you can always find me here on AVNation.tv, popping up on Tim's show and other shows, and of course, hosting AV Social.
All right, very good. Mr. Kennedy, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Tim. Always a pleasure.
How do people get a hold of you if they so choose?
You can find our website at grandbeing-usa.com, and I'm on Twitter at Hi-Fi Keith.
All right, very good. And last but not least, Meg Smith. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you for having me, Tim. It's always a pleasure. I am on Twitter at oh God, I can't remember. Machina Meg. There we go. That's my name. Or LinkedIn, Meg Shrini Smith. So either one of those, I'm always there.
Meg's pretty awesome, except for the fact that she's a Red Wings fan. So
hashtag AV Ninja.
But can I also just say it's good to not be the only girl this time? So yay, Meg! Woo.
Gone.
So, I'm wearing pink today. Never mind. I'm not even going to say that. All right.
And blue. You're gender neutral.
I am gender neutral, yes, and blue. All right. My name is Tim Albright. Don't follow me on the Twitters because, as I mentioned, Meg's a Red Wing fan. I'm a Blues and a Bears fan. Don't ask. But go by the website if you would, please. AVNation.tv. That's AVNation.tv. You'll find this program and a host of others. While you're there, check out our underwriter section. These are the folks who help us financially, help us bring you AVWeek and ResiWeek and our coverage of CEDIA and a whole lot of other things. Stay tuned to the site as well, because we've got some interesting partnerships coming down the pipeline that we think you'll be interested in. And starting around the first week, maybe even before Thanksgiving in the U.S., we'll roll out our annual awards. So stay tuned there at the website. All that and more at AVNation.tv. That's AVNation.tv. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. That's all the time we have for AV Week.